The boots were wrong. That was the first thing General Marcus Hale noticed when the man walked through the gate. Not the posture, which was correct. Not the bearing, which was precise. The boots. Scuffed at the toe. Worn through at the left heel. The kind of boots a man wore when he had stopped believing anyone was watching. Hale stood at the far end of the processing yard with his coffee going cold in his hand, and watched the man cross the gravel toward the registration table. 41 candidates had arrived that morning for the Fort Caldwell Security Restructuring Trial. A program Hale himself had designed, had lobbied for, had defended in front of a committee of men who thought tradition was the same thing as wisdom. The trial was simple: bring in the best, test them, keep the ones worth keeping, send the rest home. He had not expected this one. The man's name, according to the registration sheet that Sergeant First Class Dana Webb handed Hale 40 seconds later, was Ethan Cole, 39 years old, 8 years active service to deployments, 1 medical separation, current occupation listed as maintenance. The column for awards and commendations had been left blank, not because there were none, because the man had not filled it in. Hale looked at the sheet, then at the man, then back at the sheet. Webb said nothing. She had learned, and for years under Hale's command, that silence was sometimes the most professional response available. The other 40 candidates had arrived with the energy of men auditioning. Former special operations contractors who had brought printed portfolios. Retired officers who wore their service records, like a second uniform. 3 men from private security firms who had spoken, loudly and repeatedly, about clients whose names were meant to impress. The yard had buzzed with the specific frequency of men performing competence for an audience they believed was already convinced. Ethan Cole had arrived alone. No portfolio. No firm handshake with the registration clerk. He had signed the sheet, taken his number, and moved to the edge of the yard where a low concrete wall met the shadow of the eastern barracks. He sat, he watched. He said nothing. Captain Derek Sowers, Hale's deputy, appeared at the general's left shoulder. Sowers was 34, ambitious in the particular way of men who confuse visibility with value, and he had already developed an opinion. He's already a liability, Sowers said. Look at him. He's not even engaging. Hale said nothing. The boots alone, Sowers continued. You want someone guarding this installation who can't maintain basic equipment. Hale handed him the coffee cup. Hold this. He walked toward the wall. Cole did not stand when Hale approached. He looked up, assessed the rank insignia in approximately 1 second, and returned his gaze to the yard. Not from disrespect, from something more unsettling, from the behavior of a man who had already decided that rank was information, not authority. You didn't fill in your commendations, Hale said. Cole looked at the registration sheet in Hale's hand. No. Why not? Because they don't tell you what you need to know. Hale studied him. And what do I need to know? Cole was quiet for 3 seconds, long enough that Sowers, watching from 15 feet away, had already composed a dismissal. Then Cole said, whether the east perimeter camera on Tower 3 has been cycling on a 40-second delay instead of 30, and whether anyone's noticed that the shift change overlap at the south gate creates a 4-minute window where the motion sensors on both checkpoints are simultaneously in recalibration mode. Hale did not move. It's been that way for at least 6 days, Cole said, based on the shadow angles in the footage archived from the exterior monitor in the intake hall. The timestamp drift is visible if you know what you're looking for. The yard continued its noise behind them. Someone was laughing about something. A contractor was demonstrating a wrist lock to 2 men who looked suitably impressed. The morning went on the way mornings did when they did not yet know they were about to become something else. Hale said, you reviewed our security footage from the intake hall. The monitor faces outward, Cole said. It's visible from the gate. I had 11 minutes in the queue. Hale looked at the man's boots, the left heel, the worn leather that someone had dismissed as neglect, as defeat, as the mark of a man who had stopped trying. He handed the registration sheet back without a word and returned to Sowers. Move him to Group A, Hale said. Sowers blinked. Sir, Group A is the priority assessment track. Those slots are assigned to move him, Hale said. He took his coffee back. The first assessment was a threat environment simulation. Each candidate entered a staged room, a replica of a command operations center, and had for minutes to identify as many security vulnerabilities as possible. The room had been designed by Hale's intelligence team with 17 embedded flaws, hidden camera blind spots, a props cabinet with an unsecured latch positioned 6 inches from a replica server, terminal, a ventilation panel with misaligned screws, a secondary exit whose alarm indicator had been reversed so that it showed armed when it was live, and live when it was armed. The previous record set 3 years ago during a training exercise by a decorated intelligence officer. Was 11 identified? Flaws. The candidates went in one at a time. The results were posted on a board in the corridor outside. Most found between 5 and 9. 2 found 10. Logan Bress, the MMA contractor who had been the loudest voice in the yard that morning, found 9 and announced this to the room with the satisfaction of a man who believed 9 was a ceiling rather than a floor. Ethan Cole went in last. He was inside for 3 minutes and 40 seconds. When he came out, he handed the evaluating officer a folded piece of paper. On it, in precise, unhurried handwriting, were 17 items, every flaw, in the order he had encountered them, with a brief note beside item 14 that read, "The alarm reversal on exit 2 is the most dangerous. It's not a design error. Someone installed it that way on purpose." The evaluating officer read it once, then read it again, then walked directly to Hale's office without stopping to post the result on the board. In the corridor, Bress was explaining to 2 other candidates why the simulation had been poorly designed. Cole sat on the bench outside the evaluation room and looked at his boots. The note sat on Hale's desk for 6 minutes before he picked it up. He had read it once already, standing, when the evaluating officer had brought it in. He had not reacted then because reaction was a thing Hale had trained himself to delay. Reaction, without information, was theater. He had spent 31 years watching men perform reactions and calling it leadership. He had learned to distinguish the performance from the thing itself. He read it again now, seated, with the door closed. Item 14. The alarm reversal on exit 2 is the most dangerous. It's not a design error. Someone installed it that way on purpose. He set the paper down. He looked at the wall across from his desk, which held a topographic map of the installation. Updated quarterly, each checkpoint marked in blue. Exit 2 was on the southwestern corner of the operations building. It had been serviced 11 weeks ago during a routine infrastructure review. The contractor who had performed that service had been cleared through the standard vendor protocol. His credentials had been verified. His access had been logged. Hale opened his desk drawer and removed a single personnel file. The name on the tab was Derek Sowers. He did not open it yet. He set it on the desk beside the note and looked at both of them for a long moment in the way a man looks at 2 pieces of a picture he is not yet ready to confirm are part of the same image. Outside, the second assessment had begun. The tactical response drill was the round the contractors had been waiting for. A live scenario, actors playing hostile contacts in a controlled environment. A protected principal who needed to be moved from point A to point B through a building that had been seeded with obstacles, false exits, and timed interruptions. Each candidate was scored on route selection, principal handling, threat neutralization sequence, and time. The drill was designed to reward aggression calibrated with precision. The men who performed best were the ones who could be fast without being reckless. It was a narrower category than most of them understood. Bress went forth. He moved fast. He identified the first 2 hostile contacts correctly and neutralized them in sequence, with the efficiency of a man who had done this many times and was doing it again now, with the audience in mind. He missed the 3rd contact, a woman positioned behind a supply cart near the secondary corridor, because he had already decided where threats lived, and they lived in doorways and behind corners, not beside ordinary furniture. His principal reached point B in 47 seconds. The evaluating team marked him down twice. He did not know this yet. Ethan Cole went last again. He stood at the start position for seconds before moving, not hesitating, reading. His eyes moved across the entry corridor with the specific quality of attention that was not scanning for what was visible, but mapping what was not. He began to move. His pace was not the fastest in the group. It was something more difficult to achieve than fast. It was exactly the right speed for each moment, adjusted in real time without visible calculation, the way a river moves not because it has decided to move, but because it has no resistance to the shape of the ground beneath it. He neutralized the first contact without breaking the principal's sight line. He moved the principal left to the second junction, a route none of the other candidates had taken, a route that was not marked on the briefing schematic, a route that happened to avoid the pressure sensor in the floor of the main corridor that the drill designers had embedded as an additional timing element, and had not told any of the candidates about. He had found it on his walkthrough. He had not been given a walkthrough. He had watched the building from the yard during the morning break, and understood its geometry from the outside. The woman beside the supply cart did not surprise him. He had placed her there in his own mental map, 7 seconds before he reached her corridor, based on nothing more than the position of the cart itself, which was flush against the left wall when every other cart in the building sat 6 inches from the wall to allow maintenance access. She was the only thing that would explain why someone had moved it. The principal reached point B in 39 seconds. No marks against. In the observation room above the drill floor, Hale stood with his arms at his sides and watched the timestamp on the screen. Sowers stood 3 feet to his left. Sowers had been quiet for the last 40 minutes in the particular way of a man whose certainty was undergoing a structural failure it had not yet admitted to. He's had training that's not in his file, Sowers said finally. Yes, Hale said. That's a security concern. An unverified candidate with undisclosed, Derek. Hale said his first name. He almost never did. Who approved the infrastructure maintenance contract 11 weeks ago for the Southwestern Operations Corridor? Sowers was quiet. It would have come through your office, Hale said. Vendor clearance for exit 2. The room held the kind of silence that exists when a conversation has arrived somewhere. Both people can see, but only one is willing to name. Sowers said, I'll need to review the file. I already have it, Hale said. He did not look at Sowers. He kept his eyes on the screen below, where Ethan Cole was completing the post-drill debrief with the evaluating officer. Cole was not describing what he had done. He was describing what the building had told him. He spoke about the supply cart, about the pressure sensor, about the alarm on exit 2, and how the same quality of deliberate misdirection that had produced one had almost certainly produced the other, and how that pattern of misdirection required not a contractor's error but a decision made by someone inside the wire about what this installation should not be able to defend against. The evaluating officer had stopped writing. Cole looked up at the observation window above the drill floor. He could not see through the glass. The angle and the lighting made it a mirror from below. But he looked at it anyway, directly for exactly 2 seconds. Then he looked back at the officer and said, Should probably get the general. Hale was already moving. He took the stairs instead of the elevator, not from urgency, though urgency was present, but because the stairwell had no cameras, and he had just spent 2 minutes standing in a room with a man whose loyalty he was no longer certain of, and he needed 45 seconds of space in which no one could observe the particular expression that had settled onto his face. It was not anger. Hale had felt anger enough times to know its shape. This was something quieter and more precise. The feeling of a man who has maintained a structure for 31 years and has just discovered that one of its load-bearing walls was hollow. He pushed through the ground floor door and crossed the drill corridor. Cole was standing where the evaluating officer had left him, beside the debrief table, hands at his sides. He was looking at the exit door at the far end of the room, the door with the reversed alarm, the door that showed armed when it was live. He did not turn when Hale entered. He said, How long has Sowers had access to vendor clearance approvals? Hale stopped walking for years. Cole nodded once, the nod of a man confirming something he had already measured. The camera delay on Tower 3, the sensor overlap at the south gate, the alarm reversal here. They're not separate failures. They're a sequence. Someone has been building a window, a specific window, large enough and reliable enough to move something through this installation without it appearing in any log. Hale said, Or someone. Cole looked at him then. Yes, or someone. The room was very quiet. Somewhere above them, the ventilation system moved air through the building with its low, indifferent hum. Outside, the remaining candidates were completing their final scored exercise, their voices carrying faintly through the exterior wall. Men who did not yet know that the most important thing that had happened at Fort Caldwell today had not been scored by anyone. Hale said, Why didn't you fill in the commendations column? Cole was quiet for a moment. Then, because the last time I led a team that trusted my commendations more than my judgment, 3 of them didn't come home. He looked at the exit door again. I stopped believing the column was the point. Hale looked at the man's boots, the left heel, the wear pattern that Sowers had read as defeat, and that Hale was only now reading correctly as the mark of a man who had been standing the same post, in the same position, for a very long time. Not because no one had offered him better boots, because he had not yet found a post worth changing them for. There's a transfer request, Hale said. It came through Sowers' office 3 days ago. Classified movement of a protected asset through this installation, scheduled for 0300 tomorrow. It was approved without my signature. Cole said nothing. The asset is a witness, Hale said. Federal case. His testimony closes a procurement fraud investigation that reaches into private defense contracting at a level that would make several people very uncomfortable. He paused. Several people who have the kind of resources that can reverse an alarm on an exit door and call it a maintenance visit. Cole turned from the door and looked at Hale directly. What time does your shift overlap begin at the south gate? 0 to 5-7. and the Tower 3 camera begins its delay cycle. On the 40-second interval we can reset it, Hale said. Now that we know, reset it at 0 to 56, Cole said. Not before. If they're monitoring the system, an early correction tells them the window is compromised. They'll move the timeline or the entry point. Reset it at 0 to 56. Pull your Southgate overlap 48 hours early starting tonight under a routine administrative adjustment and put to people you trust, not sours. People you have known longer than for years. On exit to from 0 to 30 onward. Hale studied him. And you? Cole reached into the inside pocket of his jacket and placed a folded piece of paper on the debrief table. Hale picked it up and opened it. It was a hand-drawn schematic of the installation. Precise. To scale, every camera position marked, every sensor zone, every overlap and gap, annotated in the same unhurried handwriting as the evaluation sheet. At the bottom, 3 positions were circled in red with approach angles drawn in and a note beside each that read, "This is where they will come from." Hale looked at it for a long time. "You drew this morning," he said. "From the yard, from the gate queue," Cole said. "I had 11 minutes. The general folded the schematic carefully along its original creases. He held it in both hands for a moment with the weight of a man receiving something he understands the value of. Then he looked at Ethan Cole, at the worn jacket, at the scuffed boots, at the left heel that had carried this man through every quiet and unrecorded thing he had done and never named. "Welcome to Fort Caldwell," Hale said. Cole looked at him. Something in his face shifted, briefly, the way a light changes in a room when a cloud moves. "I'll need better boots," he said. Hale almost smiled. "I'll authorize it myself."